Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Subcommittee meeting. My name is Barbara Blake. I'm the chair of this committee and I'm the Seven Sisters Ward Councillor. So if we can have member introductions, please. So starting on my left is Councillor Rice.
Commissioner, starts with Tottenham here first year.
Dunstall, councillor for Stroud Green.
Esther Obeck, councillor for Northumberland Park Ward.
Then councillor Sunderland Park. White councillor for Sutton Central.
Councillor Billy Harris, Groucho.
Swan, councillor Green.
Thank you. Could the officers present introduce themselves, please, on my left?
Ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Barrett, People Services.
Officers, obviously, Assistant Director for Planning, Building Standards and Sustainability.
Robert Blocker, Head of Development Management and Planning Enforcement.
Hello, Keating, Principal Planning Officer.
Try building major applications team leader.
Richard Truscott, Design Officer.
Change manager. Yeah, I'm principal committee coordinator.
Thank you. Do we have any officers in attendance virtually? Then they will introduce themselves when relevant. So we're now on to item 1. This is filming of meetings. This meeting is being recorded. All registered speakers should be aware that they will be recorded for live or subsequent broadcast via the council's internet service or by anyone attending the meeting. Item 2, the planning protocol. Members and speakers are requested to note the information set out at item 2 on the agenda. We have apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Bartlett and Councillor Say. There are no items of urgent business. I'm now on to declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, I made some comments on Garden Road, but they were neither for or against. They were just observation. So I meant to make it down.
Okay, thank you. And can you confirm, Councillor Bell, that you will approach the item with an open mind, please?
Yes, I know.
Thank you. So the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of September 2022, they're in the agenda at pages 1 to 16. Can we approve those, please? Thank you. Okay, so we'll now consider the planning applications and we're on to Brunel Walk, N15 5HQ. Reference is 2723. It's in the packet, pages 17 to 148. I won't read out the proposal that's set out in pack. So I'll now hand over to Valerie Kay, who's going to introduce the application. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal is for the redevelopment of Brunel Walk to provide 45 new council rent homes in 4 buildings, ranging from 3 to 4 stories high, including 39 apartments and 6 maisonettes. Provision of associated amenity and play space, cycle and refuse recycling stores, and 4 wheelchair parking spaces, reconfiguration and enhancement of existing parking areas and outdoor communal areas, play space on the Turner Avenue estate. The site is indicated by the red outline. The blue line, which comprises of the most northern building of the Turner Avenue estate, includes off-site landscaping works as part of this application. Brunel Walk is immediately south of the Turner Avenue estate and backs onto the rear gardens of the terrace houses on Seaford Road, and the site is accessed from Westbury Road to the north Elm Road to the west, and Kirkton Road to the east. This is a bird's eye view of the site. The properties formerly on Brunel Walk to the south of the site, highlighted in red, have been demolished and will be replaced by new housing. The Turner Avenue estate to the north of Brunel Walk is set amongst landscape, communal amenity, private gardens, play space, and 2 parking courtyards. And the 3 existing buildings on the Turner Avenue estate indicated by the red line will be retained. However, alterations to the open areas between the buildings are proposed, including improvements to access, landscape, parking layouts, and the landscape improvements are also proposed to the remaining part of the Turner Avenue estate indicated by the blue line, but access routes will remain unchanged in this area. The site is close to, but not within the conservation. The nearest conservation area is Clyde Circus, located to the north of the site, which is indicated by the red line. The site falls within site allocation SS3, Brunel Walk and Turner Avenue of the Tottenham Area Action Plan, which allocates the site for a potential master planned housing estate renewal opportunity to improve the quality and utility of the housing stock on the site. This slide shows a number of photographs of the building within the Turner Avenue estate and Brunel Walk. The residential blocks within the Turner Avenue estate range from 4 to 4.5 stories in height. The properties formerly on Brunel Walk ranged from 1 to 2.5 stories in height. Note the existing green space within the estate and note the existing parking court. This slide shows more photographs of the site. And the bottom slide is the former building fronting Brunel Walk seen from Kirkton Road. The proposal includes 4 buildings, blocks A, B, C, D1, D2, 3 and 4 stories in height. 45 new council rent homes are proposed, which comprise of 8 1-bed, 16 2-bed, and 21 3-bed flats. And the layouts of the existing parking areas are rationalised. Proposal includes improved landscaping, public realms and access changes, new and enhanced shared communal amenity space, including play space, private amenity space, shared cycle and refuse recycling stalls, and wheelchair parking spaces are also proposed. The considerations include principle of the development, quality of accommodation, quality design, scale, setting of the conservation area, landscaping, impact on amenity, transport and sustainability. I will now focus on one of the key issues. In terms of principle of the development, whilst the proposal does not include the comprehensive estate renewal envisaged by the site allocation, the key principle of the site allocation would be delivered through replacement of the former temporary accommodation on Brunel Walk and the proposed master plan approach to the Turner Avenue estate, which includes significant improvements in communal, parking and landscape areas. The site is being developed for council housing, which forms part of its 2018 commitment to deliver new affordable homes for rent. The proposal of Brunel Walk will make a valuable contribution to the council's housing supply. The proposal seeks to provide 100% of the housing for general needs, low-cost rented homes, and the proposal contributes to a mixed and balanced community. It will make a significant contribution to the delivery of the borough's wide affordable housing target, including the provision of 21 family homes, and land at Brunel Walk is a brownfield location close to sustainable transport connections in an established residential area. This is the proposed ground floor plan. 4 new blocks are proposed along Brunel Walk. Building A is at the western end. Building B and C are the central blocks. Building D1 are the masonettes highlighted. Highlighted in orange, and building D2, which adjoins D1, is at the eastern end. All the ground floor units have private amenity space. The 4 wheelchair accessible units are on the ground floor. The purple highlights the cycle store within each building. Bicycle stands in the form of hangars and shepherd stands within the communal amenity areas are proposed for the existing residents of the estate. And the purple also highlights the refuse recycling stores within blocks A and D1. Blocks B and C in the Turner Avenue estate will have an external communal bin store as part of the landscape strategy. And the bin store for the masonettes D2 are immediately north. The new wheelchair parking spaces is to the eastern end of the development access of Braemar Road, and the remaining wheelchair parking spaces are located within the 2 parking halls of the estate to the north. This slide shows the proposed first and 3rd floor plan. On the upper floors, there are mainly 3 flats per floor within buildings A to C. Building D1 has 2 flats per floor. Each unit on the upper floor has private amenity space and a balcony. All the new flats are dual or triple aspect. And from the proposed 3rd floor plan, note how each building has a setback or steps down. This slide shows the proposed illustrated landscape plan for Brunel Walk and Turner Avenue. The proposal would provide substantial enhancements and improvements of the soft landscaping within the Turner Avenue estate, which currently consists of large areas of green space, mature trees throughout the site and existing amenity space. Communal gardens are also proposed between the new buildings of the Brunel Walk development. A total of 65 trees will be retained and 68 new semi-mature trees will be planted. And the crowns of the tree within the existing green space to the north, block D2 will be raised to reactivate this space for amenity use. And note that each new building had a green roof. The proposed open space slide highlights the communal amenity space in yellow. The private gardens of the existing and proposed ground floor flats are highlighted in pink. The child play space within the new development and within the estate is highlighted in orange. And the shared semi-private amenity space highlighted in the darker pink is located in reactivated green space and between the blocks. This is a view of the improved amenity space and play space within the estate in front of block C. This is an aerial view looking south. This is an aerial view looking north. This slide shows the proposed front and rear elevation. Note how buildings D1, D2 step down to 3 stories to respond to its immediate context. Buildings A, B and C have been carefully designed to respond to the existing Turner Avenue estate buildings. And the new building will be predominantly based on 2 types of bricks, with reconstituted stone details and brass coloured infill panels. The scheme has been through extensive pre-application discussions with officers, in addition to feedback from local residents and the quality review panel on 2 occasions. And note how the proposed rear elevation shows the outline of the former building Brunel Walk highlighted. This is the closer view of building D1 seen from Curtin Road. A new active street frontage is created on Skirton and Rainer Road. The building has more of an individual character separate to the other new buildings. Note how this building reflects the end of the terrace house on Curtin Road. This is a street view of building D1 from Rainer Road and Curtin. This slide shows the north elevation of buildings D1 and D2. Building D2, which contains 6 maisonettes, is the newest building, flats above. This is a closer view of buildings B and C, which are identical. Note how the rear elevation faces south have painted bay windows. This is a closer view of building A, seen from Elmer Road. A new street frontage is created on Elmer Road, and the front elevation of building A closes the corner on Elmer Road between the Victorian terrace houses and residential buildings on Turner Avenue. And the height of this building steps down to 3 stories from the street frontage. This slide shows the sufficient separation distance of 18 metres between the proposed new buildings. This distance would ensure a degree of privacy between the proposed dwellings, given the tight constraints of the site. The proposed buildings have been carefully positioned to avoid adversely affecting the occupants of the Turner Avenue estate buildings. And the development is separated from existing residence properties to the south on Seaford Road by 20 to 27 metres. Balconies are carefully positioned to place east and west and incorporate privacy screens to avoid direct overlooking of these properties, and the bay windows to habitable rooms have been introduced on the rear elevation of the buildings, again to prevent direct overlooking. In addition, new and replaced trees will be planted along the rear boundary to provide some screening and further mitigate the impact on neighbours. In terms of impact on amenity, there is no significant impact on amenity of nearby residents in regards to loss of outlet or privacy, no significant detrimental impact on the amenity of nearby residents in regards to daylight and sunlight. In terms of transport and parking, the site has a PTO of 3 in Part 6A, which is a good level of accessibility. The scheme is a car-free development due to most of the site's public transport and accessibility levels. All 29 existing parking spaces will be retained within the parking court areas. The scheme includes 89 cycle parking spaces for the future occupants of the development. In total, there will be 4 wheelchair accessible parking spaces, which includes the new wheelchair accessible space, access off Braemar Road, and the scheme would result in public realm improvements, enabling cyclists and pedestrian access to the 4 new blocks and connections to and from the site to the adjacent streets. This is the section 106 head of terms. Officers recommend the committee resolves to grant planning permission subject to conditions and planning obligations as set out in the committee.
Thank you, Honourable. So, do members have any clarification questions to ask the planning officer, please?
Yeah, in the conditions, it refers to secure. In the conditions, it refers to secure by design accreditation and secure by design certification. Can you tell me what the difference is between those two?
Where are you referring to?
Page 19, 8 and 9.
Sorry, sir. terms of that, question, the accreditation is at the start of the project, so that shows that we've been deciding to meet the standards, and then certification is following a site inspection where the supervisor of certain design and checks that everything is in line with what should be. This is a certificate, so it's a sort of two-step process. Signing up to viewing those measures, showing your plans, we'll do that, and then confirming that at the end of the process.
Councillor Corley Harrison.
Okay. I want to check whether the current home is vacant at the moment, at 36 homes. And what's the uplift in rooms going to be from and then on one of the DGIs, it looked like the entrance was gated. So is this a gated development? And if so, is the gate open between certain hours? Is going to be based on trial for a period. And I think in the presentation you mentioned that it would include access. So if it's gated, how is it improve access? Or if it's open at certain times, what is the access? Better, the benefits like this. Vehicles allowed on that frontage, etc.
The temporary accommodation provides of 36 one-bed units, but the actual building has been demolished.
All right.
And obviously, the proposals for 45. So what's the question, sorry, again, about the access?
The gate development.
Yeah, so it's gated from Braemar Road, so access onto Bruno Walk is gated, but the estate team will decide who gets access to the gate. So the actual, the green space, the reactivated green space will be gated. And the entrance from Braemar Road will be gated, but obviously you have the whole of the estate, turn around from the estate, that element's not gated.
There'll be less permeability in the local area, so now gated off. It's not gated off at the moment. So when industry access.
It might be worth just bringing in residents and also just toppling block behind the access. That's
Yes, thanks, guys. Yes, so the strategy on gates has been very carefully thought through. Because one of the problems with the estate at present is that it has a problem with too much building ability and lots of antisocial behaviour. And the local residents of the existing Timber estate are very keen to see that the antisocial behaviour reduced. So the only way to do that is to provide a much greater clarity between what's public and what's private through gates and things. Each of the 4 blocks will have their own front door off the public realm. So blocks B and C, which are in the middle of the estate, have their own front door off the publicly accessible courtyard between the 3 existing slab blocks that turn around the estate, where their front doors also are. And block A is to the west of that, has its own front door on Elmer Road. Block D has its own front door off Coates Braemar Road. And then there's a gate to the side of that, and that will be fog controlled. And that gives access to the little row of news houses behind block D, block D1, D2 being block has its front door off the street. So there's a row of news houses with 3 flats above that that are off that gated views. That gated views leads through into the private communal garden, which is just above blocks C and D. Only has direct access from within block C and within block D. But there's also a fobbed gate into the woodland garden, which is to the east of the existing Timber Avenue estate. Exists at present, but is currently somewhat neglected, but has no, doesn't have the same access control. And that will have a gate back into the Turner Avenue estate, which will be also phone controlled. Now that will definitely have access to everyone of the existing and new estate. Precisely who has access and able to use the fob to access the mews houses and the gate between the mews houses and the woodland garden. That's yet to be decided, but it will probably be, it will certainly include the residents of the whole of Block D. It may include the rest of the estate, or it may not, but that's partly, there's no design of the landscaping.
Yeah.
Proposed.
But
So the residents will be involved.
no resident will be able to get A mark, L mark for green.
Residents may well be able to, but certainly a resident of Block D will be able to. It may well be that they decide that all residents of the estate will be able to,
Right.
but no member of the general public will be able to.
Okay, good.
So what's important, and then each of the blocks, A, B, and C, are their own private garden shared amongst all the residents of that block only. And there are a couple of gates for service access, which will be locked and only have a caretaker scheme. It's quite complicated, really well thought through. There's also CCTV covering the fault control gates as well. Plus a couple of CCTV cameras in other places, and lots of lighting designed also carefully to improve the access and avoid the antisocial behaviour issues.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was going to ask about earlier, obviously, too, but in answer to that, in terms of the urban green factor, so the urban green factor is 0.6, which is quite high, which is quite good, but I kind of want to know how that's split across the red and the green, and red and the blue side, one of the first figures that you showed, that it's kind of a lot of the greening is taking place on the blue bit, and kind of are there, if we just look at the red bit, which is where the development is taking part, what would be the urban green factor for that?
The urban green factor is for the red bit.
It's just for the red bit, it's not for the red and the blue bit,
Oh, no, sorry, it's for both.
it's for
Yeah.
both, so if we have enough for just the.
No,
Okay.
no, just for, both.
Councillor Ross.
Okay. You said, you said, overlooking this now, if it goes, please.
So overlooking is dealt with by angled bay windows. They're introducing the rear elevation to mitigate overlooking. Sorry, angled bay windows to the new block, which are the Bruno Walk blocks to the south. And the rear elevation which faces onto the properties on.
Unfortunately, I can't see that. Pretty cool. Anyway, we carry on. Well, yeah. Well, the benefit doesn't. Stay.
If you point out on street, yeah, so those arrows are showing how the windows, convert views, at an angle away from, residents, so
How
that
far down? So we're from.
20, between 20 to 27 metres, that's the separation distance.
So recommended separation.
18 metres,
18.
yes.
Is there anyone, I'll bring Councillor Buxton back, is there anyone who hasn't asked a question? Okay, Councillor Buxton.
Sorry, just following from that point, excuse my ignorance, but surely that's just angling the windows into someone else's garden, into someone else's garden, not just
Yeah, so the main concern with overlooking generally is window to window rather than window to gardens. I mean, everyone's garden has overlooking from all their neighbours' houses anyway. We're not trying, this development is not trying to increase the overlooking into people's gardens, but what it's making sure that it avoids is any overlooking to any neighbours' windows. So by placing them at an angle, you're increasing the distance, obviously by 1.41 times the perpendicular distance, because it's 45 degrees. It also does make it more difficult to see into people's gardens. And there are quite a lot of trees along that boundary as well. It's quite a high wall. So that it's not easy to see into people's gardens. It's probably also worth pointing out that there are no balconies looking south. The balconies all look east or west, and will have a full height screen on their south side, so they can't look south into the neighbours' gardens and houses.
And I guess the window stuff only applies on certain levels. So, for example, page 94, image D, which shows the proposed rear elevation of building C. The top floor is bay windows. The top floor is flat windows.
The top floor is kept back, so the top floor is pushed back another 2 metres. So it won't be able to look down into those houses at all. Remember, these are 4-storey blocks looking at 2-storey terrace houses. So they're set back 2 metres from the main building in front of it. So there'll be an area of inaccessible flat roof between those windows and houses. So no, they won't be able to see those houses virtually at all.
Thank you. Okay, are there any more questions from the committee? No, okay, thank you. Right, we are ready to switch over to the AV system, so I'm just going to call a 2-minute recess whilst we switch over. So if you all just stay where you are, please, we're having 2 minutes. Thank you.
We're only 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
It'll be very quick.
There were 2 minutes. Okay, thank you. Oh, right. Okay, so we're back on. Yeah. So we have, I think, 2 objectors. Okay, would you like to come up? Well, you have, so is it Anna, Wainwright and Helen? Helen? Okay, so, well, you have 3 minutes, 6 minutes, so 3 minutes each. So however you want to do that, so, and I think all the mics are working now. Fingers crossed, so.
Go on. Okay,
That's it,
thank
yeah.
you.
Just introduce,
Am I doing it? All right.
just introduce yourself first.
Certainly. So I'm Anna Wainwright. I'm a resident of the briefly mentioned Seaford Road. It'd be really good if we were able to get the overlooking dock on the screen, but no worries if we can't. So I'm here to represent a number of residents of Seaford Road. Obviously, we've been discussing this. Before I start my 3 minutes, though, can I just ask a point of clarification before we continue? Is that okay? I'm not quite sure what we're asking for planning for, because Valerie, you said there's definitely going to be buildings on the site. There will be buildings. So is the planning the nature and size of that development, or is it the development itself?
I think that point was just really in relation to the site allocation, which designates this for development. So that's saying that in principle, development's acceptable here, and we are considering the principle, but we've commented that the principle is acceptable, and therefore we're moving on to the issues of detail. So no, so there's no planning permission in place, but there is a development policy that says development is acceptable here.
Can everyone hear me now? Are we cool? Okay. I'm going to build just a few assumptions. First of all, we accept that there are some merits in this development. There are some benefits. There's some real good, social development, some great opportunities to build the area, improve it, etc. But I'm coming at this from a perspective of someone who lives in a property that has a garden that backs directly onto a building that is going to double in size if this proposal goes through. So I've cut it down into the key concerns, the engagement process, the key requests that we've got, and the key questions. So I'm going to try and smash those out in 3 minutes. Pray for me. Let's go. So the key concerns, obviously the height of the buildings, it's doubling. When I bought my property, it was 2 stories directly behind me. Now it's going to be 4. I've heard some very good explanations. Thank you for the way that it's been designed. It doesn't really mitigate the concerns. The angle of the building, as Councillor Buxton rightly pointed out, is something that is of great concern. We've looked at the detail. We're still concerned about the overlooking into the gardens and the properties. The balcony location, I totally appreciate the point about the side screen, but people can move their heads over a screen. If they wanted to move around a screen, they could. They're facing east, okay, but they can still face south if they want to. The trees, I'm not going to go into detail about the trees in 3 minutes, but there are trees there. There won't be any more. The ones that are going to be built are not going to cover the blockage. They're whatever you call them, semi-mature trees. They're not mature enough to block anything that's coming into my building. The blocking of light, I read the report, and it seems to say that people break the rules all the time, so we shall anyway. That's kind of the summary at the end of that report, which was very dubious and slightly concerning to me. So that's something that I think I'd like to go into more detail in, but beyond 3 minutes. Antisocial behaviour, we've spoken about that ad nauseum. There's opportunities for more. It'd be great if we could reduce the antisocial behaviour. It's basically a drug selling opportunity at all times in that space. I'd love it if they weren't selling drugs there, but is a building going to stop that, or is actually better social investment in the area going to stop that? I'd suggest the latter, but you're the experts. The demolition of the temporary buildings, you demolished it with 3 weeks' notice. You put 1 piece of laminated paper on a lamppost, and there was absolutely no notice, no engagement, no nothing. That gives it generates really poor trust with the community. The fact that we were subjected to 2+ months of our housing and our buildings vibrating. I work from home and I had to move to a different room because my bedroom was vibrating as a result of the demolition process. No conversations, no engagement, no nothing. A piece of paper on a lamppost. Next thing I know, the building's been demolished for 2 months. Construction time of 3+ years. Let's be honest, that's probably going to be more. It's going to massively impact our way of life and our quality of life. It's directly behind the gardens of numerous people and will have an impact. I recognise buildings need to be built. I recognise we need to improve our social conditions. But I have to come at this from a perspective of how that's going to impact my life, and it's going to be considerably negative. And finally, the engagement. The engagement process hasn't been fantastic. We don't know the end-to-end process. We don't know when we can get involved. Is that my 3 minutes? Have I got time for questions? Or is that 3 minutes totally?
No, but the committee can ask you questions, so you can maybe bring out
Fantastic.
some things.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Okay.
Helen, over to you.
So, okay, so you're Helen. Can you introduce yourself then, Helen? You've got 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Helen Evans and I live on Elmar Road. So I am obviously very heavily opposed to the scheme as it stands. I and several of my neighbours oppose the scheme. My particular house is 2 houses away from where the access point is going to be on the current green space. So we're going to, this at Block A, that will deprive us of the green space, which will now become a thoroughfare for residents of the scheme. Our lives will be disrupted by increased noise, litter, loitering, most likely antisocial behaviour and possible criminal activity. Not a popular view, I know, but I understand, but it's realistic. Elmar Road itself is well known for drug dealing as it is now. There is no benefit to the residents of the new properties of having an access point at this particular location. It's further away from the underground and even the nearest bus stop. Access should be via Turner Avenue or Braemar, whatever the other exit points can be, which lead directly to transport and other services such as shops, etc. The access point, it's not clear on the information illustrations we were provided with where that access point will be. Will it be right next to number 1 Elmar Road, or will it be set further back? Since the properties at Brunel Walk were demolished, there's been a red fence put up. Is that where the access point's going to be, or will it be nearer to Elmar Road? The original properties in Brunel Walk were demolished because of increasing crime and antisocial behaviour, which indicates that the council was unable to deal with this. They're now proposing to build a bigger estate, which, given its proximity to the Turner Avenue estate, will in reality create a mega estate for a council that doesn't have the resources or, in my opinion and experience, the will to deal with the inevitable problems. We anticipate noise from the estate itself, including from balconies, as my colleague here has said, from which we will also be overlooked. The proposed blocks will be 3 to 4 stories high compared to the 2-storey blocks of the original Brunel Walk, so inevitably our light will be reduced. Parking is a major issue. Council describes this scheme as car-free, as they will only be providing parking for disabled residents, cycle parking, and not permitting residents to obtain permits for the CPZ, which covers Elmar Road. Not providing parking has never stopped people from having cars. Also, the St Anne CPZ, covering Elmar Road and Turner Avenue and Seaford Road, operates Monday to Saturday, 8 AM to 6:30 PM. Outside of these hours, i.e. evenings and Sundays, it's already very difficult for permit holders to park there. I don't know where these cars are coming from. In conclusion,
Go on then, if you've got a conclusion.
I've got a conclusion, very brief. I ask the council to seriously reconsider this proposal in the light of objections raised here and on the planning page of the council's website, and not to make the consultation process a meaningless exercise. My neighbours at number 1 Elmar Road and I have been residents here for over 30 years, and we deserve to be able to continue living in the current relative peace which this proposal will deprive us of.
Thank you. Thanks, Helen. Thank you. So have the committee got any questions? Councillor Warren.
Thank you. Please could the first speaker, sorry, I forgot your name. Yeah, thank you, Anna. Please could Anna say a bit more about your experience of the engagement process?
Sorry, I don't know why I can't get on camera. No, is it on? Is that on? Thank you. Take no fame. I think I just found, so I won't go into detail, but my job is in process and engagement management and change management. So I'm quite used to a process being end to end and understanding where the points are going to be that I can interact. And I found it quite sporadic in the sense that I didn't understand when we could influence and whether we'd miss the opportunity. So I spent a lot of time engaging with people. Some were very helpful, some less so. But I found that I didn't understand whether I'd missed the opportunity to influence this process. And I still don't know if I have. I may well have done, I may well not have done, but I still can't quite grasp whether the planning permission is what's being asked for or the detail of the buildings themselves. That's quite an uncomfortable place to be when you don't know if there's going to be a massive building built behind you and if you've got an opportunity to have your voice heard.
Councillor Buxton.
Yeah, again, to the first speaker, you started talking about breaking the rules in terms of the light coverage, but Seaford Road is the south side of the estate, so surely the light shouldn't be affected in your neighbour's garden.
Sorry, I interrupted you there. I think the thing that point was that it was slightly inflammatory the way I worded it, but I think the point that I was trying to make was that the way that the report was worded seemed to suggest that there's precedence for being slightly less than strict and rigid and following the rules precisely, which has obviously concerned people when they read reports like that, when it says we'll mitigate because other people have mitigated. It just feels a little more cloudy than you'd like in terms of how these processes are followed. So the light and the detail of the light is certainly not my area of expertise. It's more the way in which the information was presented and the way in which the rules were documented. It felt a little bit wishy-washy and a little bit like, well, if you can suggest that you will kind of vaguely follow the rules in this regard, then what's to stop you doing it in other areas of the building proposal?
Councillor Over.
Hiya. You mentioned about an increase in ASB, and from the papers I can see there's a whole two-step process about secure by design, and also about it being gated and having CCTV. So how do you think this development will increase ASB with these measures in place?
I think preventing or reducing antisocial behaviour isn't going to be done with a gate. I think it's a social change that needs to be made. I think that people's lives within the borough need to be improved on a number of fronts. I don't think putting a gate on a new building will change that. I don't think people will resort to gangs and drugs because they're living in a different building that's got a gate on it. I think that there's a whole system change that needs to be made in this borough and others to be able to drive people away from that kind of behaviour. On the more basic level, there's gardens that weren't there now that are there directly behind our properties, which to me suggests that there'll be an opportunity to get involved in antisocial behaviour. Now, of course, I'd like to think the best of this. I'd like to think that people living in those buildings would be very law-abiding citizens, but experience has taught me not to, because the area in which I live has pockets of extreme antisocial behaviour, and I don't think a gate or a strategically located pathway will prevent that.
Any further questions from the committee? Councillor Warren.
Thank you. And just to the second speaker, you mentioned the loss of a green space or loss of access, and you felt it's going to become a thoroughfare. Could you clarify, is that referring to what's kind of proposed to become a woodland garden, which would be accessible to the whole estate? Could you clarify which bit you meant?
I'm referring to the small green space, which is adjacent to number 1 Elmar Road and to some properties on the Turner Avenue estate, and the thoroughfare that's going to be created is for the access point at Block A. So that will become, a thoroughfare. It's not just a nice green space. It's going to be a thoroughfare. I hope everybody knows which bit of land I'm talking about. Yeah. And that's because it's so close to me. That's a concern.
Okay, thank you. No more questions. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Right, so we have the applicant and the supporters. They can address the committee. So I think you have 6 minutes and 26 seconds. And could you introduce yourselves when you speak, please? Thank you.
Hello, committee members. We want to just say a few words to respond to the speakers just now, just to sort of clarify some of the key objectives and ways that we've sought to address the concerns that have been raised, not just now, but throughout the engagement process. If I could just introduce myself and the team. I'm Martin Cowie. I am the Council Housing Planning Advisor. And to my left is Aisha Stewart Downing, who is the project manager for this scheme. And to my right is Anna Blanford, who is the head of the housing delivery team. If I could just sort of first set out that the reason for progressing this scheme was in many respects sort of twofold. We were keen to obviously deliver and optimise the number and range of affordable council homes. But secondly, we are also very keen to ensure that any new development of this currently redundant site, formerly accommodating housing, temporary housing, that was no longer fit for purpose, was very much to ensure that we could tie any development opportunity into the existing estate, and in so doing to enhance the external environment of that estate, which is currently being refurbished, as you may be aware, under the Decent Homes programme, and therefore ensure that we could instill a sense of place to the area generally. Now, underpinning those two key objectives was obviously the need to ensure that we could sort of sit this new development into the sort of wider context and ensure that neighbouring residential amenity, some of the points that you've just heard from neighbouring speakers, could be adequately addressed so that neighbours' amenities would not be adversely affected. So that was a particularly important sort of key consideration in seeking to sort of deliver the first two objectives of the scheme. Now, in so doing, we explored a range of options for this site. That included a row of homes, terraces and detached properties. We looked at sort of several block configurations, but ultimately to ensure that we could optimise the number of council rented homes and ensure the development would be viable, and deliver some of those other key objectives around sort of external improvements and so on, we chose the option before you. And that includes 4 effective buildings comprising flats and houses, which would provide us with a range of units to meet local housing need. And it would also allow us to ensure that we could deliver some high quality external spaces, including communal areas for both existing and new residents, play spaces, and a substantial amount of new landscaping and planting, which should obviously benefit not only sort of those on the estate, but those in the surrounding area, and would obviously encourage biodiversity and so on. So this scheme was seeking to address a number of key benefits, and it is therefore sort of, working quite hard to sort of seek to do so. Now, in respect to sort of how we've addressed the points that have just been raised by the two speakers, who've been very articulate actually, and they raised some very important points, we have sought to ensure that those blocks are of an appropriate scale, that doesn't sort of unduly cause, a sense of over dominance, overlooking, or overshadowing. They are separated by gaps of 18 metres, so that views from Seaford Road residents are sort of effectively protected across into the existing estate. And there's no denying that clearly the buildings are higher than those temporary accommodation dwellings that were there before. In some cases, there is an additional story or 2 stories higher. But because of the gaps, the substantial gaps that we've been able to retain between them, and the setback that obviously you've seen on plan from anywhere between 20 and 27 metres, we feel that that is an appropriate sort of configuration, so as not to sort of adversely affect, existing residential amenity. And that, obviously was an important consideration for us as a council. And we have amended the scheme over the last year and a half as we've undertaken substantial engagement. And that has consisted of, back in the beginning of 2021, a Section 105 statutory housing consultation, followed up by, in September of 2021, a wider public consultation engagement exercise where we wrote to about 950 properties locally, and we had both online and on-site engagement events. And we obviously sort of were able to discuss directly with neighbouring residents, many of those from Seaford Road and Elmar Road, their concerns. We subsequently went away, looked at sort of altering the blocks. We set them back. We pushed them away from the boundary with Seaford Road and Elmar Road. We had to move them slightly as well in relation to the existing blocks on the estate, because of course, as you see, they sit quite closely. And that was very much with the purpose of ensuring that we could, avoid direct overlooking, mitigate against sort of, obviously any loss of sunlight, daylight, or and overshadowing, and also to ensure that sort of we could improve the visual amenity presented at the back of Seaford Road, and to ensure that those residents had a decent outlook. Okay, so those were key concerns for the council's team.
Thanks, Martin. That's your 6 minutes and 26 seconds. Thank you. Okay, so Councillor White.
Thank you very much for that. And I'm interested to see that you've worked very hard to find a balance between the need to deliver council homes and the need to take into account the amenity of local residents. And just bearing in mind the number of people there are in this borough on the housing waiting list, many of whom are living in absolutely disgusting conditions and in dire need of places to live. Are you confident that you've found the right balance between looking at the needs of those people and looking at the needs of people who obviously, already own their own homes, and many of whom own their own homes, and obviously they need their needs taken into account as well. But do you think you found the right balance there?
Thank you, Councillor. And to be fair, on every single sort of council housing scheme that we've worked on, that has been the key challenge. Striking that balance between ensuring we can optimise, the range of council homes to meet a range of needs, of course. This, and the one thing this scheme does is seek to provide a significant proportion of family homes, which is something that obviously keeps cropping up, and we are aware is a significant need. So yes, this wasn't simply an exercise about, however, maximising the number of council homes. This had to be done having very careful consideration, because obviously as a council developer we have to be, I think we have to be sort of very much more responsible to context and our existing residents. And so yes, we looked at this exercise very much having regard to residents in the locality, both on and off the Turner Avenue estate. And we genuinely feel, as I think do your planning officers, that a satisfactory sort of balance has been struck, that seeks to sort of, not only deliver new council homes, respect residential amenity, but obviously very much improve the external quality of the environment locally. And that very much was part of the placemaking exercise that, we were keen to pursue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Buxton.
Yeah, so in terms of the objectors raised up engagement, so going forwards, what's the plan for the engagement regarding the construction plan? And then also, slightly different point, is there any plans for monitoring things like, I know it is proposed as a car-free development, but is there any plans for monitoring the amount of parking over the next 5 years, as well as the antisocial behaviour reported in the area and around the Turner estate?
I mean, I'll just sort of kick off, if you don't mind, councillor. Very, very important points, actually, that we as a council team, are wrestling with on all our schemes. I might bring Anna Reichin in sort of just to sort of talk about how we might sort of take forward engagement generally. But yes, so obviously construction period could be sort of circa sort of 2 years, significant impact. And we have to sort of obviously monitor and deliver very carefully. We are obliged to, prepare with our contractor a comprehensive construction environment management plan and a construction logistics plan. Will map out in significant detail, what the stages and steps are, what will be involved in the construction process. We will be obliged to, as we would want to anyway as a council, to engage with residents at key stages. We will have presence on site, and we will be able to sort of address quickly any concerns that are raised by local residents during that process. Really, really important, of course, because the sooner we can sort of deliver this, obviously the better for residents, both in terms who are waiting to move in, but also for those in the neighbourhood. In terms of parking, yes, we know that this is a car-free scheme, i.e. that new residents will not be able to apply for parking permits locally. So effectively, there's no kind of net impact on the road network. It's in an accessible location. It's in close proximity to a good range of amenities. There's absolutely no reason why new residents or people who are rehoused sort of locally need to own a car, particularly when there's also sort of a good provision for cycles as well, cycle parking. We will sort of, with your transport officers, we will of course monitor any parking impact over time. That is again sort of standard practice, because we need to understand how our new developments are impacting on the local area. And that will be something that clearly we as a council housing delivery team will want to understand anyway, in terms of the needs of our residents going forward, and sort of how they actually sort of live comfortably or otherwise in their new properties. So it's very important as a council housing delivery team on all our schemes, we monitor very carefully our new residents' experiences of living there. Hence why, as you know, on all our schemes, we are applying this condition requiring a comprehensive residents satisfaction survey that covers a whole gambit of the sort of possible issues that residents might be concerned with in living in these new homes. I'd like to just sort of emphasise, and I say colleagues might wish to sort of step in, but in delivering the scheme, and particularly the external landscaping improvements, of which there are a substantial amount that we're trying to deliver on Brunel, we will be sort of seeking to sort of engage with residents both on and off the estate about exactly what it is that we will be sort of providing. We've got an indicative landscaping plan that we have had to sort of present to you as part of a planning application. But in taking that and implementing that going forward, we want to sort of sit down with residents and sort of explain, is this exactly sort of what you want? Can we improve it? Is there anything else that you would like to see? Clearly, it's subject to budget and so on. But as part of the council's co-design agenda, obviously, as a council housing delivery team, we are very, very much keen to sort of ensure that we pursue that as an avenue and deliver, effectively sort of what residents want. And that's something we will do throughout the construction process as and when we're ready. Obviously, landscaping is not the first thing you put in as you sort of try to build, but as we've sort of, halfway through or whatever, we will then sort of, set up a process of engagement with residents to ensure that we can engage on those quite what I would sort of ambitious plans that we have for the Turner Avenue estate and on the periphery of the estate, particularly, as you know, because residents have raised it, on the public realm areas around Braemar Road, where you've got this sort of very, very attractive sort of communal gardens that local residents maintain. So it's very important that we ensure that residents sort of, feel part of that process. Otherwise, we will not be sort of succeeding in our placemaking objectives, of course.
Thank you. Councillor Worrell.
Thank you. Could you just respond to what was brought up by one of the objecting speakers about the demolition of the existing building and whether that was advertised and adequately sort of promoted?
Yeah, we could have waited to sort of, we could have waited to sort of secure planning permission before we engaged in that process. But given that we are on, quite tight timescales on all our housing delivery schemes, particularly in respect to funding, as you know, we felt, well, look, the properties were vacated. Most of them were void anyway. The remaining tenants who were there were rehoused, both in permanent and temporary accommodation. And we felt, well, look, it might be sort of appropriate to sort of break this process down, demolish the properties now, which were causing a problem. They were financial sort of, they had financial implications, security issues, obviously in keeping those properties empty, very incredibly substantial costs that would have sort of caused. And so we applied for a prior approval to demolish those, which is just a sort of another form of planning application. We set out why we needed to do that. And the local planning authority subsequently approved that. Now, as part of advertising, the local planning authority were obliged to put up site notices. Okay, and we did receive a number of representations, and those were considered appropriately by the local planning authority, and due notice was given that we could demolish. So we did sort of discuss and raise this with local residents beforehand as an option. So it wasn't something new, but we weren't that clear as to, at that time, whether we would pursue it. But subsequent sort of assessment of the pros and cons of sort of retaining the dwellings, security costs, etc., meant that we did pursue it and subsequently sort of demolished. But it means that sort of if we do get planning approval, we've already demolished them, and we can sort of go straight into now sort of constructing. So it sort of effectively breaks down the process, and it saves, and it becomes more sort of economical in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. Just wanted to ask about building, I think it's D2, which I'm trying to get my head around really. A series of townhouses, is that right? I'm on the right block. But they have flats on the top level that are separate to the townhouses. That's how I understand it. You're looking at me blankly, so perhaps I've misunderstood it. Do they have separate entrances? Are those entrances sat alongside each townhouse as a maisonette? And why didn't you go with individual townhouses rather than putting flats on top? Because there's obviously a certain neatness to one family, one house for a variety of reasons.
It was simply about, again, there's an exercise about sort of ensuring that we could optimize the range of accommodation, on this site. And, we looked at a whole series of options, and, we felt that, providing family homes was as important sort of in many respects to sort of, provide smaller units. And we had the opportunity on this site to do that, providing obviously that the blocks, the buildings themselves, weren't excessively large and to impact on neighbouring properties such as those on Seaford Road. So we came up with this solution, which provides which does provide in excess of the sort of the national sort of space standards, and provides a very good range of accommodation, and so that's why we pursued that option. We feel that it will meet an important need, Councillor. It's as simple as that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin.
Sorry, but what is the access arrangement? Is it a shared corridor or what?
No, so you've got individual front doors, and then you've got access sort of to the flats. Yes, separately. Yeah. Yes. And that's all via obviously the Braemar Road frontage, which, as you discussed, is gated for those residents only.
Okay. Thank you. I've got Councillor Rice and then Councillor Bevan.
Thanks. Now, one of the residents made great play about drug dealing and other criminality around the estate. What steps have you taken to make sure that you eliminate such conduct? Have you taken advice from the police? I know they've got a crime, designing out crime officer. Have you taken advice of police or from elsewhere to make sure that when these homes are built and they're pleasant to live in, as well as the neighbouring surroundings are acceptable and not frightening.
Yeah, I mean, we just, actually, we'll sort of, just to say, we've engaged closely, councillor, with the Metropolitan's Police's Designing Out Crime Officer throughout the preparation of this application. We've also been liaising very closely with your assets team, Homes of Haringey, as was, to understand the nature of the existing estate, the local area, and obviously fundamental to sort of trying to tie this development opportunity into the existing estate was very much to obviously try to mitigate the current issues of crime and antisocial behaviour. Whether you can eliminate it or not, obviously we don't know, but your assets team and the secure design officer are very pleased with the approach we've taken to try to obviously ensure that the estate becomes more self-contained. There are less opportunities to traverse across the estate, and therefore sort of, it becomes more of a sense of place where residents can take greater ownership. Would you like to just highlight your experience of that?
I think there's little more to add, except that the main drive for the demolition when we did it at the time was that ASB really had reached a fever pitch with a largely vacant site. And even when the site had been tenanted, it was exceptionally high. We know that crime is high in the area in general. I don't think any of us can dispute that, which is why from the very earlier stages of the scheme, we've worked with the Met Police and Secure by Design. We've also worked with our CCTV colleagues to design the CCTV to ensure that we've got the eyes that we need, not just on the estate, but on the surrounding areas as well, including the thoroughfare that one of our objectors rightly mentions. And that, that there may be loitering. We did consider that, which is why that green space is now no longer just going to be a patch of grass that actually, being there myself several times, is quite inviting for people to loiter on. It will now have some activity. There will be lighting, there'll be CCTV. So we have considered that quite closely. Unfortunately, we can't do that for the entire surrounding area, but we've done what I feel is the best for the space that we've got in our red line boundary.
Thank you. For you, Chair, it's just worth noting that, the site allocation many years ago did sort of envisage the potential comprehensive redevelopment of the entire estate. Obviously, the council subsequently sort of made a decision not to redevelop, but to sort of refurbish. And obviously, as you know, that's what's currently happening at the moment. So not only will this development obviously provide some improvement to the area, but I think what you're seeing currently, I know you're aware that you went round the site last week, you can see the existing blocks being comprehensively refurbished, new windows, new entrances, upgrades in terms of sort of the internal sort of quality of the communal spaces. I think that will sort of serve to ensure that residents will take a greater sort of pride and ownership of sort of where they live. And hopefully that will sort of obviously that will sort of mitigate against sort of continued antisocial behaviour. But I think the crime designing out crime officer is quite confident that this scheme will sort of secure a gold accreditation for Secure by Design, which we will be very, very pleased to obviously ensure happens.
Okay, thank you, Martin. So, Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, I want to raise 5 points, some that I've picked up from previous schemes. So one is a really minor point. How is the post going to be delivered? Because you've had schemes where you put post boxes on outside walls. Secondly, the balconies. I'm assuming that the balconies will be obscured so that people who use the balconies will have some privacy. And thirdly, the lobby. I'm very concerned about the lobbies that we have on our new housing, because they all seem to be painted brilliant white, which means the maintenance, they need to be repainted every single year, and they look like surgical theatres rather than a welcome lobby. So have you any details of how the lobbies are going to be made more attractive and a better life cycle maintenance issue? And then the fourth point is just a general concern. I've observed that there are going to be cycle storage inside of each building. So how are you going to make sure that they're used? Because what I've picked up from my experience is, although it's a good thing to do, residents are still reluctant to leave their bicycles, you know, even if it's an inside area. And the last point is the landscaping. I don't have any confidence that this council will be able to maintain that landscaping to the standards that are required, to my experience. So what would you comment on that?
Thank you, councillor. I'll kick off, and I know that sort of Aisha or Anna will step in. So in terms of post, we work closely sort of, you know, with the assets team to understand sort of how that best can be achieved, and the SPD officer, as well as the post office themselves. And each block will have internal sort of post boxes, and they will be sort of fob accessed, you know, so that sort of deliveries can take place. You know, clearly that has been an issue in the past, and we want to ensure that clearly we can address that through all our new developments. So that is what we're seeking to certainly achieve on Brunel Walk. You mentioned sort of the lobby areas. Sorry, you mentioned balconies, and you mentioned, sorry, specifically, could you just sort of very obscured, yeah, and they will be obviously appropriately screened. And I'm aware that you're also concerned about sort of, you know, balconies sort of, you know, not sort of being areas where people just store things. So, you know, you want to have them that, you know, reasonably screened so that you can't see what people might store on them. And we've designed them in such a way so that actually, if anyone does store them, you know, from an angle, it doesn't appear that you can sort of see through, you know, the railings in that sense. And that's something a technique we've employed on a number of our schemes, which, you know, we appreciate is important. One thing you should recognise is that clearly, you know, this isn't Brunel Walk, the development here does not sort of present itself onto a main street frontage anyway. It's obviously internal to existing courtyards, so it hasn't got that sort of implication. But we do take your point, and we take those your points on board on all our schemes. In terms of the cycle storage, obviously we can't force people to use their bikes, but these stores are within each of the buildings. They're secure. Again, we discuss the nature of these with the SPD officer, the assets team, as to what might be most appropriate in terms of sort of how we secure them. And as part of a travel plan, that is an obligation we have to meet on all our schemes, as do private developers, we will be encouraging sort of residents to obviously use sustainable modes of transport, including cycle and walking. So that will be something we will guide them with. And again, we will monitor that usage, and through the satisfaction survey, we want to learn more about sort of how, you know, residents do feel about those stores and whether they make use of their cycles. So it's a key part of obviously delivering in a sustainable way, in maintaining, in ensuring that we sort of promote it. In terms of landscaping, comes up again on every scheme, and you're quite right to raise it. We have discussed very carefully with the assets team, you know, Homes of Haringey as was, about how we can actually ensure that these schemes look as good as they do for many years to come, knowing full well that clearly we have challenges on our existing estates. But, you know, we are putting in place, you know, resources to ensure that these new developments can be maintained to the standards as presented. And that's something only time will tell, but clearly it's absolutely fundamental to instill confidence in this programme that we do so longer term. And I can only assure you, and I might wish to sort of just confirm this, that that's something that's been a priority for us, you know, as a team in delivering all these new, what are, you know, very progressive developments. Is there anything you want to say? Yeah.
And you just, I think there was about the lobby being painted white, and then if you can bring this to the close.
Yeah,
please.
so I'll just run through where there's something I can add. So in terms of the lobbies, no, we haven't designed to that detail, but it is, I think, a very important point, and it's something that we can raise with our assets team when it comes to our ERs, so our employees' requirements when and if we have a contractor on board, what the interiors will look like. But what I can say is that longevity and the lowest maintenance possible is always at the forefront whenever we're designing any of our buildings. But I absolutely hear you. Can reconsider Brilliant White. In terms of cycle storage, I thought I would just add that CCTV will be in place in all of the cycle stores. As a cycler myself, to me, that would be the absolute dream, would be to have an indoor cycle storage, so I don't have to leave it in the garden. Or whilst I'm really glad that we'll be delivering cycle hangers for the Turner Avenue estate, I'd like to think that internal is the gold standard. And in terms of landscaping, I think the only thing that I can add is that our landscape architect, Oob Architects, from day one, we drilled into them. You absolutely must make sure that this is the lowest maintenance planting possible. And we had our parks colleague come in, be really, really blunt with us. You know, resourcing is an issue, maintenance is an issue across the borough, but they are really happy with the planting schedule that we have put forward. But obviously we'll need to engage them at every step to make sure that anything that does go in, we can maintain. We also have between 2 to 5 years of maintenance from our contractors as standard. So at least for the beginning, whilst they're taking root, they will be looked after by external contractors.
Okay, thank you. And can I just add that it does say in the pack about encouraging residents to set up gardening clubs and to be involved with maintaining the ground. And as the councillor for that ward, I always work with residents and help them and encourage them. So, and I will do that. And I'm sure that the other councillor Simon Sappho will do exactly the same as well. So, and that was set out in the pack. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? No? Okay. So we sorry, I lost my. So we'll now move to the recommendation, and I'd like to ask Robbie McNucker to confirm the recommendation with a summary of any changes, please.
Thank you, Chair. No changes following the discussion. So the recommendation is as per the papers to grant planning permission subject to conditions and the legal letter between heads of department as set out in the report and the addendum. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we now move to the vote. The recommendation is to grant. So all those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you. No one against, no abstentions. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you. So moving on, please. So we have okay, so can we, all right, so we have a 2-minute quick break, 2-minute recess.
Hey. It's
Okay. Right, thank you. So we'll now move on to 45 to 47 Garman Road, which is set out in pages 149 to 242. The proposal, which is the redevelopment of the site to provide self-storage facility, that's set out in the pack. The recommendation is to grant, and I will hand over to Kwaku Bosman Gaimera to introduce the application, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal is to demolish the existing industrial building and redevelopment of the site to provide a self-storage facility within what we call use class B8 with associated car park and cycle parking, refuse storage, landscaping, and other associated work ancillary to the development. The site's boundary is outlined in red. So the site is located to the eastern side of Gamma Road on the junction of Sledge Road to the north, Watermead Road to the east, which is provide convenient access north to the 406. Access to the site is from Gamma Road on the main frontage and from the rear towards Watermead Road. The surrounding area, as you can see from the aerial photo, is characterized by industrial and commercial uses, north, south, and then the east. I would like to bring members' attention to the power station to the east, adjacent to the site, which is a substantial building in scale, and this is an important building to consider. The closest residential property is to the west, across the railway line to the west. Got some images of the site, which is a single story dwelling. And then you got the immediate adjoining area, mainly in 2-story. And of course, we got the power station, which you can see from the view along the west elevation, which is to the rear of the site. The main issue for consideration are the principle of development, design and appearance, and the impact on amenities on adjoining occupiers, got parking and highway, and of course, energy and sustainability. The principle of development, the site is identified as a strategic industrial land, which is sometimes known as SIL, S-I-L, which underlying aim is to safeguard the land for ranges of industry users within the B classes. So you have your B1, which is now your E class, your B2, and then your B8, which is storage. The proposed development will maintain business and storage facility use on the site, which falls within the B8 use, and as such accords with the objective of the designated industrial land. The site will also enhance employment use and economic benefits, particularly in terms of providing a more intensive use and securing a modern, viable use of the site. This, I believe, will contribute to the delivery of a good quality employment floor space in Haringey. With regards to design and appearance, the proposal will replace the existing industrial unit, which will cover the full extent of the footprint of the new modern 3-story building. On the ground floor, which I'll come down to, on the ground floor, the building will have access coming from off Gamma Road on the side. And then the proposed visitors parking is directly off the access road. The new store or shop front is laid out with the access onto the north elevation of the site, effectively from the undercroft on this side. So we got the shop front, a store which serves the storage unit. The parking is located within a secured yard immediately off Gamma Road, which provide storage parking. You got the fire access on both to the west and in the east on the side. You've got the lift which serves the building. You've got the staircases, and then of course the corridors that run across serving the storage units. On the first floor, the self-storage floor are located on the first and second floor, continuation of the staircase and the lift from the ground upwards. This is infilled with a demountable mezzanine on the third floor, so this can easily be moved and changed around. The design of the building itself, we got the section which shows the cross section of the building. We've got the undercroft or the overhang on the first floor with the storage units on the upper floors. And of course, the proposed roof with extensive green roof above with solar PVs on there. With regards to the design itself, the design of the building has been achieved through a pre-application discussion with officers, and the plans have been amended to reflect our design officer's comments. I mean, although the adjoining properties are mainly in 1-2-story high, the design of the building responds to the existing and emerging context of the immediate and wider surroundings. The proposed building, in terms of height, is almost similar to the power station across on Watermead Road. The emerging context of the site, we got our site, which is outlined in pink here, and in the surrounding areas. In terms of the emerging buildings, you got the new development on Watermead Road, or Meridian Waters, which are almost, the first phase, I believe, is 54 meters high. The second phase, 45, and the third phase. So we're looking at very high, tall buildings. Adjacent to that, across on the other side, you've got the IKEA and the Tesco site, which are also for concentration for much higher development. Within the immediate context of the application site, you got the yellow and green. The yellow building is 18 to 20 Gamma Road, and then the green is Unicorn site, which is 21 to 25. Those are the emerging context of our current buildings, which have planning permission. Although slightly smaller, but they are broadly comparable in scale to larger emerging contexts. And that view, basically, you can see from the north of our site, looking up to Meridian Water, you can see the tall buildings, and of course, the yellow and the blue building behind our application. Overall, it is considered that the proposal will have a general improvement to the character of the space and appearance of the area, as well as maintaining an appropriate industrial build form in keeping with the aesthetic of the wider area. The height of the building itself will not detract from the immediate surrounding or even the wider surrounding. With regard to materials, it will be of a steel frame with steel cladding to reflect a more modern warehousing in the surrounding area. a condition has been imposed to make sure that we sort out a good quality material for the external appearance. With regards to impact on adjoining occupiers, I would like to go back to the aerial photo just to give you a bit of context to the surrounding. So the surrounding to the north, south, and east are mainly all industrial. The nearest residential property is across the railway line. You're looking almost 250 meters from the site, on the site. So as such, the proposal, given the significant distance of the nearest residential properties from the site, I mean, it is not anticipated that the proposal will cause any significant harm to adjoining neighbors or even within the wider area. And of course, the surrounding area, immediately surrounding are all within industrial units. And also given the low nature use, the nature of use of this development, which is mainly very low key, I don't anticipate there will be any issues at all in terms of harm to the neighbors. I'll then move on to parking. I mean, perhaps this is a recent storage which has just been opened in Barking, just across the A13. So it gives you a bit of context what the likely development is likely to look like. This has just recently been opened just across the A13 in Barking and Dagenham. Of course, the scheme provides quite extensive landscaping around as well, which will give you much more good visual aspect in the locality. With regard to parking, the existing access off Gamma Road will be retained. There will be a gate arrangement within the site, which will provide a secure area within which there are 6 car parking spaces plus a bay for a van. There will also be a 3-bay for visitors in between the access gates and then the entrance, along with visitors parking, which is where you've got the 6 here. And the 2 of the parking bays will have EVCP bays with active charging facilities. There are secure cycle parking, 10 short stay parking cycle plus 10 long stay, and this meets the London Plan requirement. In terms of number of delivery and services trip, this will be very low, given the low-key nature of the scheme. We don't anticipate there will be a huge number of delivery and services along there. However, servicing point has been arranged on the Gamma Road side, directly adjacent to the shop front. Our highway officer is satisfied with the travel plan submitted with this scheme. And of course, he's considered some conditions to be imposed, including section 278, which will improve the access point area. And of course, conditions with parking details, delivery service plan, and then construction management, just to make sure that minimum disruption occur within the surrounding area. And all those have been set out in the head of terms in the document that you've got. With regard to sustainability, energy, and drainage, the development achieves a reduction of 54% of carbon dioxide emission on site, which is supported. I mean, this is achieved through a number of means. You've got passive design, where the external features have been included to provide a degree of shading from the sun. You have installations where the use of insulated layers of the building to allow rapid heat transfer from a state interior to exterior environment. You also have smart energy meters for time and temperature zone control. You have natural ventilations incorporated into certain areas of the scheme in order to preserve heat during cooler months. You have lighting system designed highly effectively in line with building control requirements. We have air source heat pumps, and of course, roof mounted PVC, which you can see on my roof slide here. Yeah. Extensive green coverage And of course, the landscaping goes somehow towards in meeting the urban green policy of the London Plan. Officer, although there's a shortfall in some of the information on heating and system management, particularly to the costs, I mean, the officer is happy that the condition that has been imposed will be able to overcome those issues. Yeah, so a number of conditions has been imposed in the application. We've also seek carbon offside certain contribution as well. And all these has been set up in the heads of terms and the condition. We don't anticipate any impact at all on drainage. And as such, officer has suggested some conditioning with drainage, which has been imposed. With air quality and contamination, officers are satisfied with all the measures that has been submitted, and they've basically suggested conditions which will be imposed to mitigate any potential contaminants on the site. And of course, with proposed waste collection, the site propose a waste within the ground floor, and in the travel plan, they basically give us in terms of collection arrangement for collection, which we will control with a condition just to make sure that they meet the standard, the current standard in terms of it. Of course, with waste management for commercial properties, it's not something that we local authority control, it's all private, but we will impose, of course, conditions just to make sure that the arrangement is satisfactory and meet with more modern standards. Yeah. So overall, the scheme basically strike quite a good balance between the aspiration of the applicant to have a self-storage facility in this borough with minimum impact to the surrounding, and of course, in meeting the underlying objective of the strategic industrial land. I would therefore urge members basically to support this scheme broadly, which broadly meet council adopted policy and the London Plan, subject to the head of terms and the conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kwaku. Thank you. Right. So, do members have any clarification questions? So, Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. The site is sort of bigger than the immediate vicinity in the industrial in that industrial space. And that industrial space is also quite dated, and I would anticipate further development, perhaps. 4 stories does still seem quite high. I do accept that it's 250 metres from residential properties, and we've got the electrical bit over there, but it does strike me as being quite high. I just wondered whether or not, any thoughts on how low rise the rest of it is. From my memory and from the pictures, they are sort of 1 to 2 story light residential units, and this is a big proposal.
Immediate surrounding, you've got mainly 1 or 2 story buildings on site. However, to the south of the site, we've actually approved the 2 yellow and blue color, which you can see here, which are almost of a comparable height to the proposed. So the proposal in terms of the height would not detract from the immediate property, given the emergent context of what is basically going to be built. Across the road, which is a couple of meters, you've also got the high power station. So, and of course, to the north of the site, Meridian Water, you've also got a huge development which is taking place. So immediate context and the wider context, I think it will not detract at all from the site. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 questions. I'm aware that this area has a Japanese knotweed issue, and having checked the conditions and informatives, I couldn't see any points with regards to the Japanese knotweed. So I'm just wanted to find out whether we can add a condition or informative about prior to development, whether an investigation can be undertaken and a treatment plan implemented should there be Japanese knotweed identified. And the second point is in relation to the section 278 highway works agreement. I know that the paving around that area is not in a good state, so just wanted to get clarification that that will also entail improving the pavement. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the Japanese knotweed, clearly, yes, there's a statement which was submitted, which the aim of the applicant is to basically get them removed adequately. So we would therefore impose informative as part of the approval if my members are minded to ensure that it's basically dealt with. Yeah. In relation to the paving, Robbie, do you wanna, this is 278.
Yes, I think it would be appropriate just to clarify in the wording that the 278 works should include that pavement improvement, having seen the state of that on site, and I think that's an acceptable mitigation for the development, bringing additional footfall into this area.
Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, just to say about the design, which utilitarian that you said, so I'm taking your word that although it is like that, it won't sort of be a prison type looking development. But can I ask about the fences? Are there going to be any fences? Because I'm really concerned about these developments have fencing around that makes the whole area look like a prison. So that's my first point. The second point is what Councillor I just said, Councillor Erbat said. There's no condition in here about money for resurfacing the roads and the pavements, which are actually in an appalling state. There's no condition at all. There's nothing here. And the Japanese weed stuff, there should be a condition, not an informative, because it's really rampant around there. So I would like to support what my fellow councillor says about a condition for Japanese knotweed and the state of the pavements and roads, which are appalling around that whole site.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. On the Japanese knotweed, that is controlled by other legislation, so it's inappropriate to condition that, but an informative is appropriate to bring that to the applicant's attention, that they must deal with that and their statutory obligations to do that. And yes, on the 278, that has been undermined. We discussed that with the applicant today, but we weren't able to confirm that to report it in the addendum, so we will be seeking to include that as the 278 condition.
Fencing?
There is no actual physical fencing. The fencing mainly will be by the landscaping, but just getting into the site, you've got a bit of a gate, access gate that will let you up into the site. But the fencing around the site, none at all. It just people done will be by way of landscaping all around the site. Yes.
And Councillor, just to add, condition 3 covers fencing, so should the applicant wish to put any up, we will have control over the detail of that.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you. First, I must say that I'm quite pleased to see this proposal come to committee. Over the last 10 years or so, various proposals for development has always been housing and around Ashley Road and so on, there were like industrial units around there. That's all gone to housing. So I'm pleased to find that some developers thought the way through the problem and began to supply work units where people can get employment. Just one point, I'm not sure what material has that building, what it is made of. And just someone earlier on the committee talked about the state of gardens and the landscaping. But, you know, if you're going to put, there's proposals to put landscaping in this site. If you're going to put landscaping in this or industrial site, miles away from anyone else, who's going to look after it? No one's going to take a blind notice of it. Once it starts to take hold, it just runs to ruin. But anyway, that said, I'm just pleased that this development has come to committee so that we begin to build an industrial base to what little we have industrial in Haringey.
I mean, the materials will be similar to what has been done on the side of the estate, but we will control that with condition just to make sure that good quality material is sold after, yeah, on that basis. Then, I mean, you've got the similar one which has been the one in Barking, you know, we can possibly also control in terms of the color as well, which will all come through as part of the approval. Yeah.
How high is the?
I mean, the scheme is about just roughly 23 meters high from the ground. Yeah. And I think Shergard schemes are almost the same sort of height all over the London. Yeah. The one in Purley, similar height. Barking, 21, 22. Yes, yeah, almost similar height throughout. I mean, with self-storage, you always need a floor to ceiling height. So that's why you need them to be that high. Yeah.
I've got Councillor Worrell who wants to come in.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a point of clarification about the urban greening factor, because I note that because of the use class, it's not actually required to meet the 0.3 target. But though there is some detail about, you know, the greening that's going to be done. But then later in the document, it says that as a condition, it will need to show that it's met the 0.3 target in construction. So I was just wondering, like, would it not make sense to set out now whether the proposals that have been put forward do meet the 0.3 target? What's the benefit of actually requiring that at a later stage? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll let Sue tackle most of that particular aspect of it. Yeah.
So your question is whether it's useful to be conditioning this, essentially. Good question. I think there is still benefit because often, as we've seen tonight, landscaping schemes are subject to further design after permission is granted. And in this case, the urban greening factor statement can inform that. And I think it would be very helpful in this instance to do so. Does that help? Thanks.
Okay, so Councillor Corley-Harrison, then got Councillor Bevan.
Yep. My first question is, it's literally the opposite to George's question, really, in that 4 stories seems, even though they're commercial stories, small to me. And so I'm wondering, is there not a wider area action plan for the area that is encouraging development on what is an area which is really good, principally for large scale development? And do we not have kind of minimum levels that we want to achieve? And then my second question relates to staff parking. So I get the impression that there's six spaces, is it, are predominantly for customers. So I'm just wondering what the staffing levels are going to be within the site and where the proposed parking is for those staff, given the PTAL rating.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, typically, the staffing for these sort of industry, these sort of storage is between 3 and 4 people, full-timers. So potentially, it's quite a very low number of staff. In relation to the tall building aspect, we've got designated areas within the borough where we normally prefer tall buildings to go. This particular site doesn't fall within that site, but given the emerging site to the north and the other side, in context, I think it's quite an acceptable way to treat the site, yes.
So on my first question, well, it was second question, where will they park?
We've got 6 parking spaces. Well, yeah. I think I'll get Maurice to have a basically, yes.
Good evening, Chair. So I hope you can all hear me. So there's parking provided within the development proposal for the employees, but as Quakers has said, for a development of this nature where it's self-storage, it's very low trip generation in terms of staff. So there's sufficient parking provided for both people who are coming to drop off and for staff.
I think the applicant was keen to answer, so maybe when they come forward, they could just answer or whatever. Yeah.
If you can pick that up when you, not now, I've just got someone else and then I'll bring you in. So Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, I think because the demand for these units is huge, I think all the adjacent buildings will eventually and very quickly be knocked down and replaced with much higher developments. But an issue that's come up in the past with this road, with all these extra sized units and the articulated lorries driving up and down, there was a request quite a while ago from some of the occupiers of that road that it be made one way, because at the moment big articulated lorries can just get stuck and can't get past, and there's parking as well. So I'm just wonder, Maurice, I think you might remember this from many years ago, but could we deal with that issue with this application and make that Garman Road one way?
I think the short answer to that one is no, Chair. We'll have to do it as part of a larger scheme in consultation with the other business. I think also this section of Garman Road is kind of a dead end, so there's a turning. There's a turning head at the bottom here, so you couldn't make it one way on this section. Probably the top section you could do where it cuts back to Watermead Way, but this section would definitely have to be two-way. But I would have to look at that as part of a larger scheme, not in isolation.
Okay, thank you, Maurice. So any more questions? No? Okay, so as there are no speakers, we'll move to questions. So questions for the applicants. If you could kindly come forward, please. Okay, thank you. So if when you first start speaking, you could introduce yourself. So are there any questions for the applicants? Councillor Corley-Harrison, the parking one, thank you.
Yeah, hi, my name's Richard Byatt. I am the development manager in the UK for Sureguard. So in terms of the parking, we have very limited travel numbers anyway. So we have probably 3 to 4 vehicle movements an hour in and out the site. So with regards to our staff, we encourage them to use public transport. We encourage them to cycle. So there's probably only going to be one car parking space at the most taken up by our staff during any period of the day. So you know, there is ample parking on the site for both staff and for customers. Yeah.
Any more questions? You, Mr. Evans, is there anything?
That's correct. Yeah, thank you.
Is there anything that you just want to add to the parking or anything?
No, Chair, thank you. Everything's been said. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's much appreciated. Thank you. Okay, so there are no other questions. So we'll move to the recommendation. I'd like to ask Robbie McKnocker to confirm the recommendation with a summary of any changes, please.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points that will be added to the recommendation. An amendment to the condition on the Section 278 agreement to ensure that includes improvements to the surrounding pavement and an additional informative in relation to the applicant's obligations under Japanese knotweed. Otherwise, it's as set out in the report and the addendum, and recommendation to approve subject to Section 106.
Okay, thank you. So the recommendation is to grant. So we'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. So no one against and no abstentions. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you as well. Thank you. Thank you. Right, okay, so moving on. So we've got update on major proposals, which is pages 243 to 260. This is to note. Can you direct any questions to Robbie McKnocker? Are there any questions? No, okay. So item 11, applications there are questions. Councillor Bevan.
Can I just ask about the almhouses in Edmonton Close? This has been on the agenda for years. What's actually happening?
Yes, Councillor. It has been a long pre-application process on this one, but that is now in as a live planning application and went out to consultation just before Christmas. So we're just considering that at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No, okay. So item 11, applications determined under delegated powers, pages 261 to 290. This is for noting. Are there any questions? If so, can we have them for Robbie McKnocker? No, okay. So there are no new items of urgent business, and the date of the next meeting, which is to note, is the 6th of February 2023. So now close the meeting and thank you very much to everyone. Thank you.